Hi guys, I'm Reece Forward from Fast Forward Film, and today we're going to be talking about editing softwares. More specifically, Final Cut Pro, Davinci Resolve, and Premiere Pro. With that being said, let's get into it. Hoorah. First off, I want to say that there is no one software that beats the other, and it's all personal preference. But I thought I'd go over some of the pros and cons for each software that I've noticed in using all three. And at the end of it, I'll suggest maybe what you might want to consider if you're just starting out and you don't know which software you want to go with. So yeah, let's start with Premiere Pro. Okay, so Premiere Pro. Now Premiere Pro is probably the most used software, I would say, the most widely used software. From everyone that I know that does video editing, most people use Premiere Pro. Now I'm not quite sure why that is. There's a few reasons why I think it is. One is that After Effects, Adobe Audition, Photoshop, they're all, Cinema 4D as well, they're all connected together. So you kind of get that ecosystem of all these different apps that work together and kind of mesh. So anything that you need to do, whether it be VFX, whether it's 3D modeling or like minutely changing your audio, you've got all that in one package if you buy the Adobe full package, which you can get at a discounted price as a student, which is one of the pros of Adobe in general. You get access to Lightroom and Photoshop and all of that stuff, all of that great stuff. So yeah, I would say that that is a pro for Premiere Pro. A pro for Premiere Pro. And also I'd say it's relatively simple to use. With softwares like Davinci Resolve that I'll get into later, there's a little bit more of a learning curve. But with Premiere Pro it seems natural, and I feel like that's why it draws a lot of people into using it, if that makes sense. Now using Premiere Pro can differ between computers, and I would say that there is a huge benefit to having a PC when you're using Premiere Pro. He says using a Mac, but with PC, obviously you've got a lot more room for like modifications and upgrading specific parts of your machine. So like with Premiere Pro, there are certain parts that utilize your GPU, which there's not a huge amount of parts that utilize your GPU, which is one of the cons, but there are a few plugins that utilize your GPU, but also your CPU. If you've spent all of your money on a really expensive CPU, Premiere Pro is gonna run really well. Whereas like obviously if you're on a Mac, like for a long time now, to get a good CPU in a Mac, you've gotta spend a lot of money. Saying that, the new M1 Macs have just come out. They're great, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But I would say if you've got a Mac or a PC and you're kind of umming and ahhing about what software you should use, I'd say that Premiere Pro is going to be great if you've got a PC. It's still great if you've got a Mac, but it's going to be that little bit better if you've got a PC. So now we're going to move on to cons. Premiere Pro, with all of its great features, does have some drawbacks. For instance, one is that you can't edit B-RAW or Blackmagic RAW without a third-party plugin, which you've got to spend extra money for. So if you've bought a Blackmagic camera, chances are it's not going to be the best idea to get Premiere Pro because you won't be able to edit the footage on it unless it's ProRes. It's monthly payments, so you can't just spend one amount of money in one go and then have that software forever. You have to keep spending monthly, which if you're not a student or you don't know anyone that's a student, and you can use their student ID, I didn't say that, but yeah, if you're not a student, you're going to have to spend, I think it's about 50, 60 pounds a month, which, especially if you're just starting out, like that's quite a lot of money. So that is a con that I would say in comparison to all of the other softwares that we're going to be talking about now. Another thing I don't love about Premiere Pro is the gamma shift that you get when you export your footage. Like you'll do your color grade and you'll be looking at it in the editing software and you'll be going, oh, this is great, like it looks really good. And then you export it and it doesn't look the same as it did in the software. Now, Adobe has released a LUT that you can put on top of your footage, and it's meant to counteract that sort of gamma shift, but I haven't noticed, I've noticed a difference, but it still doesn't look exactly the same as it does in the editing software. So Adobe, that'd be great if you could sort that, but it's going to be a con at the moment. So moving on, one more con that I've got that I could think of, and that is that it crashes quite a lot. Now, I am using the beta version, which is meant to be somewhat optimized for the M1 Max, but still it's a bit buggy, a little bit buggy, and it always has been. Like, since I've been using it, there's been little quirks and little bugs in it. But that's kind of the gist of the cons for Premiere Pro. Saying that though, it is a great software and I would highly recommend it to anyone. Like, if you spend the money, you're not going to be disappointed with the software. It will do everything that you need it to do. But moving on, we're going to move on to Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro, if you own a Mac, you're sorted, basically. Like, Final Cut Pro is optimized, it's made by Apple, so it's optimized for all of Apple's new computers with the M1 chip, and it runs super smoothly. And I would highly recommend, if you've got a Mac, if you've just bought a new Mac and you don't know which software to go for, then I would highly recommend you consider Final Cut Pro, because it's great with Mac. Obviously it's made by Apple, so it's going to be great for Mac, but yeah, it's optimized footage that you would otherwise not be able to edit on Premiere Pro. Like, at the moment I'm using the M1 Mac Mini, and like trying to edit multiple stacks of 4K in Premiere Pro, it's just, it doesn't like it. But on Final Cut Pro, it handles it just fine. Obviously when you start chucking loads of color grades and stuff on top and effects and stuff, it struggles a little bit, but then that's to be expected. It's their baseline chip. It's going to get better from there. But yeah, I would highly recommend Final Cut Pro if you have an Apple computer or Apple Mac. Now, I'd probably say that Final Cut Pro is the most beginner friendly. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of preset things that you can just kind of drag and drop and it will do a lot of the work for you. Saying that, the other softwares do have that, but I've just found that Final Cut Pro does that a little bit more. Whether or not that's a good thing, that's subjective. Like, if you want to get in and edit every little thing, then you can do that, but just maybe not as efficiently as you can do on Premiere Pro or Davinci Resolve. Another huge benefit of Final Cut Pro is that it's a one-off payment. So you pay one-off and you've got that forever. And if you're a student, or you know anyone that is a student, you can also get a student discount, and it comes as a bundle. You get Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, and then that VFX software, and you also get some other music software as well, which is great. One-off payment, I think it's £200, you get the lot. So that is another huge benefit to Final Cut Pro. Now, some negatives. I've noticed that the cache files that Final Cut Pro creates are ridiculously big. Now, I don't know why that is, and it may have changed. I haven't used it in a little while, but it may have changed. But when I was using it, the cache files were ridiculous. Like, I'm talking half a terabyte for one project, which is crazy. I don't know whether there was settings in there that I had to tweak. But yeah, that would seem like a crazy amount of cache for like a 3-minute music video. It was a bit crazy, really. Doesn't have great integrated VFX options. There's not many VFX things that you can do on Final Cut Pro, at least not to the standard of Premiere Pro, for instance. Now, again, I haven't delved into it a crazy amount, and they do have their own dedicated VFX software. I think it's called Motion, actually. Yeah, it's called Motion, and I think that's for graphics and stuff like that. So there are options out there, but I just don't think that it's utilised and as streamlined as Premiere Pro. Like, in Premiere Pro, if you want to edit a clip in After Effects, there's literally an option for you to just quickly click, and then it'll take you into After Effects, and then you can edit in After Effects, and all the changes that you've made in After Effects will appear on Premiere Pro. The same with Adobe Audition. So it's all kind of linked together, whereas with the Apple software, you've got Logic, which is specifically for music production. You can do, obviously, audio editing in Final Cut Pro, but it just doesn't seem it doesn't seem as fleshed out as Premiere Pro. And obviously I'm guessing that's because it hasn't been around as long, and like Apple, it's a one-off payment. So the amount of progress that's made on an app that's a one-off payment is probably going to be less than an app that's people are paying £50 a month every month. Like, they're just going to have more money to kind of put into that software development. But saying that, Final Cut Pro is a great option, and as I said, if you own Apple products like an Apple computer or Apple Mac, it is going to be great, and it's going to work really well with the hardware that they've created. Now, Davinci Resolve actually has a free version, and it's pretty great. Like, you're not missing out on a huge amount in comparison to the paid version. I think there's like grain and noise reduction. I think there's some things that are missing from the free version. But saying that, you can get a free copy of Davinci Resolve if you buy a Blackmagic camera, which leads me on to my first like proper pro of Davinci Resolve, in that you can edit Blackmagic RAW, which you can't do on either of the other softwares. So if you own a Blackmagic camera, I would highly recommend you learn Davinci Resolve. It just makes the editing process so much quicker. Like, you don't have to go into Davinci, which actually I've made a video and we're going to post that real soon, of how you can convert your B-raw footage into ProRes footage, but that will be coming at a later date. Anyway, so yeah, you've got your Blackmagic RAW footage, which you can't edit in Final Cut or Premiere Pro unless you've got a third-party plugin. They have been made, but it's just extra money that you don't necessarily need to spend, because Davinci Resolve comes free with a Blackmagic camera, and you can get a free version anyway. And if you want to buy the Pro version, then you can do so. But again, it's a one-off payment. You don't have to spend monthly payments. Another great pro. So Davinci Resolve does have a version that's optimized for the new M1 Max, which is great. Again, I wish Premiere Pro would kind of speed their process up and get those apps ready, because there are a lot of people that are switching to M1. So you may remember I said that Premiere Pro has Adobe Audition, After Effects, Cinema 4D, all of that in the Adobe package. Well, with Davinci Resolve, you get a sub software integrated, which is called Fairlight, which lets you edit your audio, which is actually pretty good, like, it's decent. And then you get Fusion, which is your sort of VFX subsection of the software, if that makes sense. There's little tabs at the bottom that you can click on, and yeah, you get the whole gist. I would highly recommend you download the free version anyway. Just have a little browse and see what it looks like. Like, you may love it. You don't have to spend money on Adobe, because you can get quite a lot of the other things for free in Davinci Resolve. Say for instance, Cinema 4D, which you get in the Adobe plan. You could download Blender, which is an alternative to Cinema 4D, which is actually pretty great, and a lot of people use that. We'll be doing a video on Blender as well later on, at a later date. But yeah, so I would say that there are ways around not spending lots of money on the software, and with Davinci, it's kind of great. Like, you're not missing out on a huge amount, and I would highly recommend, if you haven't got any money to spend on software, then Davinci is going to be your best bet. Now, there are very few cons that I can find with Davinci. That's mainly because you get a free copy of the Pro version with the camera, so you're not spending out on that software, and you can also get a free version. So it's going to be a little bit biased, because any negative cons that I can find with the software is kind of null and void, because you're not actually paying for it, if that makes sense. But anyway, we will still go over some cons that I've found. First of which is the node-based system. It's actually quite efficient, and it's taken me a little while to get used to it, but I'm noticing some of the benefits of using a node-based system, especially if you're used to Blender, for instance, which is a 3D software. It's not too dissimilar to Blender in that it's node-based as opposed to sort of layer-based, if that makes sense, which Final Cut Pro and Premiere Pro both are. They're sort of layered, whereas nodes are kind of, you get little boxes and they're all connected like a spider's web. That's a little bit of a learning curve. So that's one con, I guess you could say it's a con. Not really a con, because if you put the time into learning it, then you'll breeze through. Again, the free version is missing a few things, but saying that, like, it's free, so again, you can't really be too picky, I guess. But yeah, you're not missing out on a huge amount. You can still edit and get a good result with the free version. So get that free version, even if you've got the other softwares. Like, just do it and see if you like it, because you might. And I guess the final con, and really, again, it's super picky, but Blackmagic has done a great job of building this sort of ecosystem where everything that you would require for whether it be filming or streaming or recording or editing, they've made something for everything. So if you buy Davinci Resolve, or you get Davinci Resolve with your Blackmagic camera, then you can edit B-raw, which is great, but then the controls in the software are they're designed in a way that's meant to utilize their editing consoles. So you can buy like color grading consoles and like, I guess you'd call it like a cut and edit console, which has got like a little wheel. I'll put a picture up there. And yeah, their software is kind of utilized and optimized for those consoles. Obviously you don't have to use them, but if you do, then your process is going to be a lot faster. Now, that's a subjective con, and I wouldn't necessarily say that that is a con, because like, yeah, if you buy the console, then you're gonna have a great time. But yeah, I'm just being nitpicky at this point. It's not necessarily a con. So with that being said, let's quickly go over what I would recommend personally based on your situation. Right, so if you own an Apple computer, I would say your two best options are gonna be either Davinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro at the moment, just because Premiere Pro isn't optimized for the new M1 Max. And also, I would say that if you film in ProRes, then Final Cut Pro is going to be great for you as well, because ProRes is an Apple-made codec and it's going to work great on Final Cut Pro because it's Apple-made. So if you're very Apple-orientated, I would suggest maybe using Final Cut Pro. Premiere Pro, I would say if you've got a PC and you're a student and you don't mind, you'd rather spend monthly and then cancel if you have odd months where you won't be using it, or you want access to Photoshop or Lightroom, then I would suggest, yeah, 100% use Premiere Pro. And if you are using a Blackmagic camera, or you are really going into the sort of color grading part of filmmaking, then Davinci Resolve is going to be brilliant. Like, it's going to be really good. It's so well optimized for color grading and that sort of process of the editing. So yeah, these are the pros and cons that I've found. As I said, it's completely subjective, and you might want to just completely ignore everything I've said and just go with a software because you know someone that uses that software, or you like the look of that software. But anyway, I thought I would go through this, point out some of the pros and cons that I've found. I hope this video has been helpful, and with that being said, see you in the next video. Like, comment and subscribe. I'm Bruce Forward from Fast Forward Film. We ride.